CAA members. The importance of this work goes far beyond the history of the Brewster family and their significance in the carriage industry. It creates a window. Just imagine being able to look back 100+ years and actually see the daily records, the daily invoices, the drawings, the showroom drawings. You can almost envision a visit to the Brewster factory to see about buying a carriage. In fact, here in this notebook are some of the original sketches that they made that CMA has in their library they kindly brought today. They had a very unique point in history because they were a leader in manufacturing and design. Not only that, but construction of them, production management. They had some of the finest records you'll ever see. And of course, the sales, they were top-priced manufacturer and high-quality vehicles. The Brewster family's involvement with the carriage industry was about 125 years, from early 1800 until about 1920 or so, when they started in the automobile business. Actually, they started automobiles about 1905, as one of our speakers told us yesterday. But the beauty of the Brewster family was that they were faithful record keepers. And we see this more after William Brewster took charge of the management. I'm told he grew up in the shop, working different areas of the shop to learn the trade, which was pretty well the standard in that day. But by the time he was about 20, and this would have been in 1886, I believe. I think he was born in 66. But when he was 18 or 20, he went to Europe. He studied design with some of the people over there. They exchanged ideas, as you saw in the car presentation yesterday. But they continued to make vehicles until around horse-drawn vehicles to around 1910, even 1950. There were some made. But these records show the Brewster involvement, and the industrial production was so sophisticated for that day that many times they had a drawing or a specification for a vehicle, and the parts were assigned out into the shop for making, and that's one of the reasons for the numbering system, because the blacksmith would have been told to build these 4 steps, build this handrail, et cetera, for number 4233, and he would do that. The other side of it was their production and accounting records. They kept meticulous records of not only the production, but even used vehicles, which we will talk about a little bit later. The value of these records is not just limited to Brewster, because you know if Brewster was a leading manufacturer, A.T. Demarest, any number of Healy, Kimball, Hooker, all the other carriage builders were certainly competing for the same market. So you could assume we're doing a lot of the same things at the same time, especially colors, choices of design, and so forth, kind of went in fads like our cars do. The records that are available are in the one trial. The records that are available in the New York libraries are three different places. The early CAA team that went there, and Jack Day was a participant in that directly, so we appreciate Jack. The limitations of what they were able to accomplish was limited by the technology of the day. They photographed all of these records, many of them that we have in this set were photographed then, but the technology was not sufficient to give good, clean copies. There were burned edges around the pages, and unfortunately the owner's name was on the very bottom of the page where he bought the vehicle. The follow-up information about the sales book where the invoice was on the bottom of the page. The drawing page. So a lot of things were destroyed, and it was frustrating at least to deal with that. Talk about where those records are. These are actually the records I would like for you to envision. I know you may not be able to read that, but the idea is the format. This is a specification sheet. Think about the sales list that's in the window of the car when you go pick it up, when you go to pick out a new car. Except this has, in the top right corner, the drawing number of the vehicle is the top right number that you may or may not be able to read. The top left is a Howell gig, and that's the vehicle type. And on some, you have the buyer top center. So you can imagine if the edges of that page were burned, how much information you lost. It goes then to detail even the shop employee that was doing the wheels, the shop employee that was doing the ironwork, etc. But we find keys here for the accoutrements too, because many times, I don't think this one has much, but down toward the bottom, well, about the center of the page on the right, it tells you what kind of lamps it had on it. So if you're researching a vehicle and you want to know what kind of lamps you're supposed to put on that vehicle or what matches it, you can go into the Brewster Records and look at a similar vehicle and see literally what they put on it at that time. Even if it was a Demarest or something else, likely they would have been using it in the same style. But this is the value. I didn't want you to try to read that, but you will find that some of them are very cluttered. They are cursive writing, so it makes it a little tough. They abbreviated a lot of times. You have to begin to learn the abbreviation. They have a 1H and 2H, and that means 1 horse or 2 horse. Phaeton. And so you have to begin to learn to read the technology sometime. But these records literally go, the ones we have physically like that, posted on the CAA website, go from numbers 17,450 to 25,903, about 8,500 vehicles that we could research down to what was their color, what was the size of the rear wheel, anything you want to know about it is there. And these are printable from the CAA website. If you're a CAA member, you can print any of these that you want to, and if you have enough paper, you can print them all. But now we have clean images, and the other thing that we gained was that with the new technology, you can zoom that page on your computer screen, and it does not break up into the little bits that it would in the old. If you started to zoom it in the old format, it would just break up and you had big spaces between the ink, so you couldn't read it any better. But that is the specification sheet. Remember the terms. So the specification sheet at the top left has the number, and I believe that is 17,450, which was the first one we have. Now, the next form that we want you to be familiar with is the actual invoice. These are called sales memos or sales memo books. And that is the actual invoice from a vehicle in 1888. It's sold to J.R. Johnson. It was ordered a certain date. And what's fun about this is a lot of times it not only gives you the buyer name, but it gives you his address. And Google has gotten smart enough in this era that you can take a name and an address that's 100 years old and Google it, and it will tell you which church he belonged to. Literally. So you can tell, and what his sport was, and all kinds of information. Now, on the sales invoice, there's often additional information like the accoutrements. You know, if they ordered robes, they ordered aprons, they ordered clocks, they ordered umbrella baskets, they ordered horns, they ordered all kinds of, some of the ladies that were so short ordered extra foot pillows to put under their feet on the vehicle. The first vehicle I ever had that came in that had foot pillows, I thought, this is ridiculous, you know, who would do that? And they were original, so it was possible. But now we have the clean images, and these are also printable. These are all on the internet, on CAA website, and printable for you. The next form that we have are the indexes or indices, whichever way you want me to say that. And there's two sets of these. One is by number, and that's sequential in the front of that year's book. You can see what numbers they were working through and what the vehicle was. Now this is where we get into good fun, because if you wanted to, you had a Demers Phaeton and you knew roughly when it was made, you could go look on this list and see what Brewster was doing with his Phaetons during that period. What colors was he using? And many times they built several of the same thing at one time. I theorized that they had 2 or 3 orders, or 2 orders, or 1 order, but they made 4 or 5 vehicles. They cut them out. They did some of the preparation work. And quite often it was months between the time that the vehicle was ordered and it was delivered. So sometimes they had some in stock that they could, yeah, I rather think it's like buying a new home nowadays. If you get there early enough, you can decide what color white you want them to paint it. The next one is an index by name. And this is a gold mine, because in front of every sales book, you see these book numbers, book 14, book 26, so forth, and book 1, they started over in 1900. They went from book 26 to book 1. And I emboldened the line on book number 1 because in the records of the Met Museum, they had a notation that they never received book 1. So that one was missing, and guess what? One of my characters was in that book. So I did find the specification sheet, but I couldn't find the sales memo. So I had to find a like vehicle close to that time to get what I thought would be the price. But we'll visit that a little bit later. But one other thing, I talked about future projects that someone could do, and I envision myself when I'm 94, sitting in front of my computer, looking back through these orders and seeing how I can figure out something else. Because these numbers, if there's book 14, what happened to book 1 through 13? I'm sure he didn't start with book 14, but it's very interesting. But the more I look at this, the more I see possibilities, because William Brewster, the last Brewster operator of the company, went into the office in 1884. He did all of his shop work, went to Europe, so forth, but by 1884, he was in the office, and he was a perfectionist. So I attribute all these recent records to his diligence. He was quite proficient at record keeping. But anyway, these, the index over here gives you the names that are in that year's sales book, and it gives you the page where you can find the record on that vehicle. Now, sometimes you see someone like Vanderbilt that ordered 3 vehicles that year. So it was the Vanderbilt, Cornelius Vanderbilt, whomever, and then 3 different pages because he ordered 3 different vehicles during that year. So that index is invaluable. These records were all at the New York Public Library, and that's where Jack and the people who went the earliest were able to obtain what they did, and it was a wonderful start for this project. The next records were in the New York Historical Society, which is, I don't know New York City much, but having gone there a time, someone will do that. Having gone there a time or two, it's across the park from the Met Museum in a short bus ride away. But in that facility, they have 4 account books. And remember this terminology or begin to recognize it. The account books are one-line writings about a particular vehicle. And these date from 1856 to 1882. So again, they go until William Brewster came in, is my theory. They changed this and went to the more detailed records. Now, the other records may exist, but we don't have them. But this lists the vehicle numbers. It gives handwritten orders. Sometimes you would see interspersed in here a repair order or whatever was going on that day, and the work to be performed, the date of service, and even the charge sometimes. This particular page that I picked out randomly wound up being an early page. I believe it's 1888. I may be mistaken on that. But anyway, it does indicate some sales of new vehicles to other manufacturers. You know, that has been bandied around, but I believe I can prove that after 1882, they did not sell any vehicles to other manufacturers. They had an exclusive deal because they had a premium price on their vehicles. They had all the business they could get, and they certainly didn't want to be in the wholesale business with that method of operation. This is that same page up a little bit closer. It just gets tantalizing when you do slide projections. You can't make them where you can read them most of the time. But on this page, there are some sales to the Sargent Company. And William P. Sargent, wasn't it, Jack? But Sargent was a manufacturer. So at that time, there were certainly some sales. And by the way, I have checked some of those numbers, and that not only can you see the sale, but where it describes or is a new vehicle sale, that number like 3391 or whatever I see up there is actually a drawing number from the Mint. So we can tie, even as early as this, carriages to the specific drawing numbers in the Met's library, and we have those. At the Met, in 1923, William Brewster retired. He donated his library, his records to the museum, to the Met Museum, and these other records to these other facilities. He was quite civic-minded. He was on all of the boards and commissions and made nice donations to places. But when he retired, he donated the drawings to the Met Library. This is one of the draft books. I've enlarged it and it distorted it a little bit, but I wanted you to see these drawings are about the size of a business card. If you look at a business card, it's just about that size, And the artist, you ever think about if you kept a ledger, how many mistakes you make, and you write, you erase it, and you're going to have this marked through, and so forth. These artists were drawing these into a permanent ledger by hand as it came to their mind. These were designs that they had seen or dreamed of or hoped to find or somebody had suggested. But the coach, Rome, Clarence, whichever it is on the top left, is typical of what was being sold at that time. And these numbers all the way around indicate specific carriages made from that picture. So you can find a carriage number here, and you know that it was made from that particular record. And there are hundreds of these in these books in the Metropolitan Museum. We could not copy those because we have the larger copies. What they did a lot of times was say, they look through the book and see which the customer liked. Do you want this style or this style or this style? Actually, there's some original drawings here that John Stallard was kind enough to bring today that are pen and ink drawings just like this that were obtained by Ken Souls many, many years ago. But this was known as the draft book, so you could go and look through it. Again, remember, each one of those pictures, there were probably 16 carriages on each page, and all of them I looked at, I never saw a mistake. I never saw anything that looked like eraser or anything like that. So they must have had lots of self-confidence to write in that book. And of course, some of these numbers are helpful too on the bottom. One thing that's a real find that I wanted to show you, these are the actual cabinets that Brewster stored those drawings in. Now, this was not what you saw on the previous page. This was the full-size drawings that they created. So if you can read it, you can see there was one for coaches, a drawer for roof seat brakes, etc., etc. And that's Mary Farrell's foot on the bottom. She wouldn't let me take her picture. But that's the nearest I could get to getting Mary to pose for the picture. But there's two of these cabinets that were literally moved from Brewster's factory to the library and left intact. And because of the talents and the skill and the access that Mary Farrell is the only way we have this. I mean, we just cannot say enough how much he has been instrumental in this. But this project really would have never happened without that. In a planning session, actually Jill and I were in Florida, or Mullinall, for a meeting that had been rained out and canceled, and there's only 3 or 4 of us that showed up during the storm. But we were talking about the progress we'd made on cleaning up the film and how it was going and what the possibilities of improvement were. And we thought, well, let's call Mary and tell her how well it's going and all that. If you've ever heard of Project Creep, you know, you ever started to remodel your kitchen and you wind up adding a room on the handle of the house and all that kind of stuff. Well, this is Project Creep, because as we talked to Mary, she told me, well, of course, I knew she had been working for the Met Museum for years as a volunteer. Over 14 years, I don't know, it may be 15 by now, but she had been working there to examine each of these drawings in each of these drawers and other drawers like it to describe what they are and get them ready to be photographed someday. Well, in the course of this conversation, we talked to Mary and told her how good we were doing, and she said, oh, by the way, I had cataloged 2,300 drawings now. And I'd love for y'all to see them. We said, well, what are they? We talked a little while, and she said, the Met doesn't have any money to photograph these, so they will never be photographed even after I've done all the preparation. They even gave her a computer to use specifically for this job. And aside, we could walk up to the door of the Met Museum and they'd say, come on in, Mary, you know. So she is just extremely well known there. But the idea of getting these records, these drawings, original drawings that matched what we had been working on for 2 years was just more than I could stand. So I asked Mary, and she agreed that she would get a price and a set of the requirements for photographing those. We would have to pay for the professional photographer who was qualified and accepted by the Met Museum to do the photography. But in the deal, we got the fact that they would post all of these on their website, and they would host all that on their server and make it available to the public, and that would become public property, meaning we could print one of those drawings on, that's one of them. We could print one of those drawings on a t-shirt and it wouldn't be illegal with the arrangement that we had. There were 2,204 colored drawings. 111 of those had folding papers that come down over it. Like if you wanted to see that body on that coach transition to a road coach, you could just turn down the two other transparent pieces of paper and cover the seat that's there, etc., and you could see it as a road coach. It was more meaningful, for instance, on a George IV Phaeton, because they could show you the Phaeton with the top up and show it to you with the top down in the same drawing. Now, you don't have to believe that every coach made from this drawing was made that color. The colors, most of the time, were done for the benefit of the customer, and they were in the showroom to look, and they say, here's a drawing, and here's what it might look like in these colors. What colors would you like? So that was kind of the idea of that. But these drawings, there's 2,204. I think there's that many at least listed on the website now. So you go to metmuseum.com, and you don't have to be a member of CAA to do this. You can get on the website, and you click on Art and Collections, and that takes you to the line where you can type in Brewster and Company, and if you want to, you can put Brewster and Company 3328, and it'll bring up that picture immediately. But if you don't know what it is, you can type in Brewster and Company Coach, and it'll bring up a page of coaches that are like this. So it's easy to operate. It's a public service that CAA has provided. And by the way, we collected $36,000 within 30 days to do this project. And CMA contributed to that campaign too. But this is what we obtained in the form of the drawings. I don't know that if you have ever, let's see what this is a working drawing of that same vehicle. Is that 3228A? This is a revision of the same drawing. There is a drawing like this, it's 3328, which is exactly what the craftsman used to build that vehicle from. So this drawing is this two-scale drawing of a coach. And they could literally take, the artist in the shop could literally take this vehicle drawing and draw it on a chalkboard, full size, from that, and the craftsman could come up with his measuring tape and whatever, and measure the piece he was about to build. So there were no written plans, that's it. But they worked from that. Now, there's some secrets on this that I won't give away right now, but one of the puzzles that we were able to answer has been going on forever, since I've been around in carriages. But this was part of what the reward was for doing the pictures along with the other project. If you want to locate the specification number, and how do you start? How do you start to research one of the vehicles? If you're at an auction or in a collection like we were a couple of days ago, and you can observe a vehicle and you say, gosh, I'd like to have one like that, or what is that? When was that made? You can look generally under the seat board. You know, the front of the cushion is right here. That one board is right there at the front of the seat. Right there is the number. And if it's not there, then you have another search to do. But that's the first place to look. And it will almost always be a 5-digit number between 17,000, remember, and 25,000. So if you find that number, you can go directly to the CAA website and open up and find the original order for that carriage that you just looked at. I've done that a few times, and I'll share those with you. This is a Stanhope gig that's Brewster. It was restored nicely, but not my favorite colors. And it has Brewster and Company on the hubs, but nowhere is there a number on the vehicle that we could find without examination. I asked the owner if she minded if I took off one of the lamp brackets. I think you may be able to see a little bit of the lamp bracket there between the wheel and the side of the seat, just a little black spot. If I could take off one of the lamp brackets, and I might be able to find the number. That's the back side of the lamp bracket, and that is the number, 23544. Can you see that? Yeah. Now, that's one of the easier finds, because you know they were not going to paint over that because it's on the back side against the paint job. So once they put it on there, that number's protected. Now, another place where they're often numbered is on the bottom side of the rear axle. So you can look at the bottom side of that rear axle, and what are you going to find? Rust, dirt, because it's exposed to everything that it's ever driven through, every mud puddle and so forth. But I'll show you one of those perhaps in a minute. But this vehicle this is the original order for that vehicle. It listed as a small Stanhope gig. It was sold to a J.E. Widener, and like I said a while ago, you can Google almost anything. Well, I could Google, see, they had the shipping information on the sales order, which I'll show you in a minute. I could Google J.E. Widener, and he was in Connecticut, across the water from Long Island, and he had racehorses, and he had this gig. He raised hackneys too. So he had ordered this vehicle, this specific vehicle, on its, that's the back of it, you can see the lamp bracket. He ordered this vehicle, and that's the invoice on that vehicle. here they call it a min stand-up gig. Over here they call it a small stand-up gig. So you can't always take each term literally, but there is a reason that they call it a min. In the order, it was said, well, one, it says they deliver to Madison Square Garden. So they ordered this carriage. He lives up in Connecticut, and he wants it delivered to Madison Square Garden in time for the show. So he didn't even see the vehicle until it showed up at the showgrounds. Originally, the carriage, believe it or not, was solid black upholstery, no striping. The only ornamentation on it was the brass hardware, and it said polished brass. Now, you think about that, Barry Dickinson used to say, it's not about the carriage, it's about the horse. So he was going into the show ring with a beautiful horse that he wanted to market his horses. So he wanted this spanking, sparkling black carriage to disappear as he drove through. And I'm sure it did, because with the lights and so forth, it would have been stunning to see this black, brand new stand-up gig with a fine hackney in front of it. But that's the revealing part of this. This carriage sold for $600. I think it's up in the right-hand column somewhere. Yeah, up near the top. And over on the side column, he kept a running total of his sales so that he was adding each of these invoices as he went down the line, so that at the end of the month he had a running total, and we'll talk about that too. Okay? And this vehicle still is very, very drivable. There's not a scratch on it other than it's been repainted and redone. This is a wagonette brake. The slide distorts it a little bit, but this is a wagonette brake that I have. And the issue on it was, when I looked for the number on the seat, it had two 5-digit numbers. I don't know why, but I can't prove anything when you have two, you know. So I started searching, and the boot door on this is on the other side. It's on the passenger side, so he can get into it. But that boot door opens out, and I took a light and looking all around the different surfaces, and the number on the bottom side of that door was 171. 23171. So the carpenter was just given a portion of the number, because they were in the thousands here, so that the number wasn't going to change before he finished that door. So they numbered it. Then I said, well, not sure that the 3-digit number really means that, even though I think it did. But I told you about rear axles. Can anybody make out a number? Somebody see? Amongst all those rust pits. See, I had cleaned that axle at that time, took off the rust, and of course it was an unfinished surface to start with. The blacksmith was not real careful to file that exactly smooth, because that's the bottom of the axle, folks. We don't do that. But anyway, after totally removing everything from the axle, it revealed the 23171. And this is the vehicle I was telling you was in sales book 1, which is non-existent. The library never received that.